excited to have you share your thoughts on road mapping. So we'll hand it off to you.
Thanks, Barbara. Appreciate the introduction. Good morning or good afternoon to everyone on the call. As Barbara mentioned, I'm Clint Williams. I'm a program manager working at Microsoft. I actually work on Microsoft Teams engineering. So my role is centered around working with third-party software companies to integrate their core workflows into Teams in the form of apps. So I work with some of Microsoft's largest partners globally to bring in high-value user scenarios into Teams, so users can be more productive and collaborative around tasks without the need to switch between applications. I'm going to spend some time today talking about best practices around creating a shared vision using a roadmap. We have a fairly unique organization here in the way that we're distributed across both local teams based in Seattle, but also globally. We have engineering organizations that span multiple continents, so having a shared vision across that roadmap is super important to us internally. But we're also working closely with partner engineering teams. So the process for creating a shared vision through a roadmap and sharing that with each of those separate teams so everyone understands where we're heading is super important to us. This ensures that we're mutually able to deliver what our customers need and what they expect from us, but also provide them with value. First and foremost, we have obligations to our customers. So yet because of the two-sided marketplace that we have created here with Teams, having both the supply of apps in our marketplace and also the demand coming from customers, we treat our partners as customers also. So without one, we couldn't have the other, typical dilemma of a two-sided marketplace. Our partners also have obligations to their customers. So for example, if they commit to deliver a Teams integration but are blocked from shipping that because we don't deliver a feature that they're dependent on, it has a ripple effect down the line. So again, having a shared vision of where we're heading and what our future strategy looks like is as important as ever in this particular scenario. The fact that we have multiple separate teams that are often pulling in different directions means that having a clear, concise North Star to point to in the form of a roadmap, or in our case, several roadmaps, which I'll go into in a moment, is super important to keep everyone on track. Whether there's a situation where we need to make a judgment call on where to prioritize resources or where to invest, having a living, breathing roadmap to reference keeps us all aligned. When it comes to roadmaps, there's three categories that are equally important in my role, as I mentioned. The first is the roadmap of the core Teams product itself. So this is the central functionality around the product, which is the foundation of Teams. So chat, calling, meetings, etc. The second roadmap is that of the Teams platform. So this is the functionality that provides extensibility to partners to build on top of. So for example, a partner that wants to build a chatbot inside of Teams would leverage this platform. We have a unique roadmap for that. And then thirdly, we have the roadmaps of our partners. So each partner pulling in different directions obviously has their own priorities. We need to be across those roadmaps and understand where we can plug into those. So based on some of the things that I've already mentioned, I'm going to provide my perspective on what I feel are the fundamentals for what should and shouldn't be included in a roadmap. So firstly, the roadmap should be a prototype of your product strategy. And the easiest way to think about this is using your roadmap as the talk track whenever you have a conversation with any stakeholders around the direction that you plan on taking your product. This should include the what, when, and why, which I'll go into in more detail shortly. Your roadmap should include your product vision for the organization, including all of the high-level initiatives that will help you to achieve this particular vision. Next thing is the clear plan of the goals and milestones that you've set for the product or for the organization. So without going into too much detail, what are the big projects you're going to deliver as a team and what are the target dates for achieving each item? Here it's important to call out what success looks like so that everyone that's involved understands once you've achieved a particular milestone that you've set out to as a team. Here you need to share the future vision with customers or prospective customers. So existing and prospective customers are interested in getting a view into the product vision that you're able to share. This may induce them to continue being a paid customer or turn any prospects into paying customers in the future if you're able to land a vision for some of the big ticket enhancements that you have coming down the pipe. Obviously, some information may need to stay internal only and shouldn't be shared externally, but it's important to create a filtered view that does share those big items that are coming down the pipe to A, encourage customers to stay engaged with you, but B, to create some excitement around what's coming in the future versions of your product. Next, you should obviously share your future vision with the immediate team. So obviously the team that are going to execute need to be aware of what's been committed. However, and I'll touch on this again in a subsequent slide, it's vitally important that they're involved in the process as much further upstream as possible. So in order to get their feedback, get any input from those team members, that should be a process that happens before you've committed to the roadmap, before it's shared broadly, making sure that everyone feels like they're playing their part. And I'll talk about the negative impacts of not doing that as we move further through the deck. Next, you want to be able to obviously share the vision with the company. So in a large company like Microsoft, it's important that the roadmap shared broadly across the organization. So any dependent teams that we work with are clear on what's coming down our pipe so they can factor that information into their future plans. Lastly, and this should not come as a surprise to anyone, obviously you need to get executive support for what comes in your roadmap. It's critically important to ensure that the leadership are brought into the vision and will support each of the milestones that are included. Ultimately, they're the ones that need to sign off on funding and resources. So having a champion on the executive team always helps with that process, making sure that they can help find the right path to get agreement from the stakeholders that make the most difference. We move over to things that roadmaps should not do. One of the first things here is a roadmap shouldn't be a static document. It should be a process. So documents that are written are often created and then they're done, they're final. If you feel that a document's final, it becomes a chore to then go in and update it. Your roadmap shouldn't feel like that. If you think of your roadmap as an evolving process, you'll be more inclined to include less ground level detail and more inclined to make updates as things change, as they inevitably will. You shouldn't include too much detail in your roadmap. So points 2 and 3 that I'm going to talk about are fairly interrelated here. The initiatives that are listed on your roadmap should be high level enough that they don't include specific tasks required to achieve any of the big rocks, but low level enough that it's still clear what the desired end state looks like. If you need to include a lot of detail in your roadmap, let's say to satisfy the needs of the sales team, my advice here is to create a specific view only for that sales team that includes that level of detail. Next, your roadmap shouldn't look like a backlog. The roadmap shouldn't be a list of features or a to-do list that can be used as a project management tool. As I mentioned above, you shouldn't call out the individual tasks, resourcing, funding, etc. That are part of the project, obviously, but they shouldn't be included in your roadmap. These things will likely change often once you get down into the weeds of execution, and you don't want to be going and making updates to the roadmap on a daily basis as these things change. Another thing that you need to be mindful of when creating a roadmap is not over-promising on things. Any element that's included in the roadmap should be coming from a place of confidence. So all of the team members that are going to execute should be confident that they're going to be able to deliver any of the items on time, or there's no significant technical blockers that are likely to come up and catch you out, things like that. It's very easy to get swept away in where you want to be in 12 months' time, but by including initiatives that the team are going to execute, by including initiatives that the team that are going to execute are not confident in, you're going to create tension, you're going to create anxiety, you're going to impact morale of the team. This is obviously a bad thing for the future progress and how quickly you actually make it to your desired goal in the end. This flows into point 5, which is around not building your roadmap in isolation. So there's a balance to be had here. Minimizing the number of people that can make changes to the roadmap is important because it's If an initiative appears without your knowledge, you can lose a shared vision. So being able to share in a clear, concise summary with all of the teams that are relying on your roadmap, where you're headed. If you don't know all the items that are in your roadmap, that's obviously difficult. You need to be working with the team members that are going to do the execution to actually make sure that all of their input and feedback is factored into your roadmap. They need to buy into the direction that you're heading in. They need to feel like they have some skin in the game, which will naturally push them harder to make things happen. So how to land a shared roadmap. So following on from my point around not building a roadmap in isolation, I worked in several teams throughout my career, admittedly before agile and iterative work practices became popular, where the product team were responsible for building the roadmap. They'd work on that roadmap in isolation, write specs for everything they wanted to achieve, and then hand these off to design, who'd add some color to the UX, provide very fixed visuals as to what any features and functionality look like, and then they would hand that feature set off to engineering, who are often the last ones to see the plan. We now know that this approach doesn't work, and I don't think it ever did work completely. So getting input from all of the internal and, where possible, external stakeholders is critical in your product success when delivering a roadmap. So building the shared vision across stakeholders, aligning everyone in the investments being made, and the prioritization of initiatives is critical to the success of the product, but also to the team over the mid to long term. All of the points that I mentioned today regarding the key elements of what to have and what to avoid when creating a roadmap all tie back into the importance of the what, when, and why. So for every initiative that's listed on the roadmap, it's really important to include these and that they're clearly articulated. What we're going to do. So what are the big strategic rocks that we're prioritizing above all else to go and do? What is the expected outcome of the initiative, and what does success look like? When are we going to do it? So what are the proposed timelines and the sequence of events that will get us there? The timelines don't need to be down to the day, week, or even month level, but it's important to have some form of timeline in place to ground everything in reality. Most importantly, for any initiative that's in the roadmap, is the why. Why is it that we're going to be doing this? It's critically important that everyone from engineering, design, sales, marketing understand each of the points above, but primarily, why are we doing these things? Is it because of a competitive threat? Is it because we see some strategic advantage by moving on this first? Is it because customers are demanding this? What is it from a business perspective that is driving us to deliver each item that's listed here? So providing everyone across the company, in the immediate team, and anyone that has a dependency on your roadmap with the what, when, and why, obviously have some positive and potentially some negative impacts. The positives are around inspiring, motivating, and empowering them to make decisions as they go about their day-to-day. So by providing them with a framework for ongoing decision-making, when they're faced with a decision about whether or not they should go after a particular initiative, let's say there's a particular task that comes up, in order to enable some on-the-fly prioritization, giving them the framework where they can say, does this decision that I'm about to make map back to why we're doing this for the roadmap? If it does, yes, I'm going to do it. If it doesn't, it's questionable whether I should actually prioritize this. Should I move on to something else? A couple of other things that are super important in the roadmap process from my perspective are being honest with the current reality. So where is it that you're at now? Identify what's working and what's not. What are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? In the same way that your roadmap shouldn't be built in isolation, it should be built on facts and acknowledging your strengths and weaknesses. It's important in the early stages of your roadmap to include some quick wins. So having some momentum early that you can share with the team will really help with morale and motivation to keep pushing things forward. So include some initiatives in the early stages that you know are set up for success, and use this momentum to build to bigger things and more complex initiatives as you move further down the road. The next thing is around communication. So think about how you're going to communicate the roadmap initially, but also how you're going to communicate any changes to this on an ongoing basis. Think about how you're going to keep everyone up to date as initiatives evolve, or as the roadmap changes course at some point in the future. It's important to over communicate progress and any changes that are coming than to change course and have stakeholders left in the dark. This can be challenging when you're spanning both internal and external stakeholders, but making sure this is factored into your thinking right from the start is super critical in this process. So that's it from me in terms of my overview of best practices around creating a shared vision using a roadmap.
Well, thank you so much, Clint, for all of your insights and talking us through some of the best practices around road mapping.